Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we review every single Best Picture nominee for the calendar year 2024. We are making great progress getting through all 10 of these nominated films. This is what we do year after year. We've already watched every single Best Picture winner. And so now we must prepare ourselves to know all the potential winners and to find out which one of the Academy's 10 picks is truly the best of the year.
That's our quest.
That is our quest. That is our quest. And today we will be talking about Cord Jefferson's new film, American Fiction, starring Jeffrey Wright, mostly.
Yes.
As our main character. I'm excited to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on this film. But first, we need to remind you of what happened on the previous episode.
Get out the broom, get out the vacuum. It's house cleaning time, housekeeping time.
That's right. Last time we discussed Past Lives, the debut film from Celine's Song, and we didn't just discuss it. We quite liked it, in fact, and the film got a 9.3 out of 10, rocketing it to spot number 1 on our 2024 Best Picture nominees list. Good job. I recommend you go watch the episode and get in depth about this. I think it's a pretty meaty film.
Yeah.
Or else,
yes,
something bad and unrelated will happen in your life. Okay.
I hope not.
Half of the cleaning is done. We've mopped the floor. Now we need to sweep it. Oh, wait, the other way around. You're supposed to
maybe dry it first?
Never mind.
Abram, read a comment.
I'm going to comment for my review of Expendables 4.
What?
Perfect. Whoa! 5 days ago, somebody left a comment on your review of Expendables 4, the one you guys did. We've gotten some interesting...
The film's official title is Expend4bles.
Yeah, it's true.
We've gotten some interesting comments about recent Quest episodes.
That's true, we have.
But I would rather read this
But why
comment.
highlight those?
No, I'd rather read this comment of Expendables 4. This comes from... Linda Magagula 7476,
who is never going to see this review.
I have never read this. I'm very excited.
They write, I was so surprised by Jason Statham's aerial bike. It reminded me of Chuck Norris riding bike from Delta Force. I wasn't impressed with the blood CGI. It is similar to straight-to-DVD horror movies.
Biting analysis.
Fun fact about Expend4bles.
Sure.
I decided to
rewatch it.
No, I decided to let's say imbibe some a certain substance before entering this film, and remember absolutely zero things about it. I was actually asleep for most of the runtime. I'm pretty
still
sure.
Did a review though.
Yeah, still did a review. I didn't let Tucker know that was the case before I reviewed it. Held my own quite well in said review. You go and watch that if you'd like. I think I do reveal it to you at some point in the video, which is a fun little reveal. We like to do a fun little reveal at times in these videos.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, there we have it.
Yeah.
Boom.
There we have it.
And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
would someone with good humor and a fun spirit like to reveal to me the plot of this film? Give a little.
What?
Well, that could be any of us.
It could be any of us. It's gonna be me.
Okay.
Oh, I know.
Oh, disappointing.
You'll get him next time, buddy. You'll get him next time.
He will get him next time.
American Fiction is a movie about a man who's a writer named Thelonious, quote-unquote, Monk Ellison. He's a writer, he's a teacher, and he is having problems with his family. His sister passes away, his mother is suffering from Alzheimer's, and in order to sort of get back at the world for treating him differently and for he thinks he's kind of above other people, he decides to write a book called Fuck, in which it is heavily stereotyped towards Black America, and he wants to kind of just get at everyone. But in the process, he also ends up making some money to pay for his mother's care, and then things go east, west, south, up and down, and we spin off into the story that is American Fiction. But it's about Monk.
It's about...
At the end of the day. See, I'm not as experienced with this as Tanner is, okay?
That's true. That's
all right, guys?
That's okay. All right.
And now, Tanner...
But I was correct. That was the movie about.
Yeah. In large part.
Tanner, since you were so deprived of your ability, your ability to recap the film, why don't you recap your thoughts on it? An opinion, not just a straight fact.
Yeah.
Can you just recap the nominations this movie got?
I would love to do
just
so.
To start
I'd
us
love
off with
to
all
do
the
so.
info.
This is my second time watching the film American Fiction, and I'll be honest. I did have some not issues. I'll say qualms with the film the first time I watched it, and now having rewatched it, I wouldn't say that those qualms are resolved. But I think I'm just provided with more detail about them to sort of discuss this film in detail as we're about to do. And it might sound like I don't like American Fiction, and don't let that fool you, dear viewer, because I do really enjoy this film.
Don't let me fool you.
Don't let me fool you. I do really enjoy this film. I just have more like concrete and specific and issues with the film, or qualms, excuse me, that I can talk about more in depth than with these other films, I would say.
Sure.
Because I think it is quite a complex.
Type in American Fiction.
I got it. I know it. I'm making eye contact with the camera.
He's connecting with the audience, dude.
Anyway, before I was so rudely interrupted, I was about to say that by and large, I love Jeffrey Wright's performance here. I, especially on this rewatch, grew to love Sterling K. Brown's performance and his characterization. But it is a film that is really, to me, kind of in two halves, or maybe like 60-40, more honestly, about a family drama and then a biting satire, a raw, essential satire of American culture. And one of them works a lot better than the other, as we'll discover. But to speak on this film's nominations, American Fiction was nominated for Best Picture, as we are talking about here right now. It was also nominated for Best Performance by a Leading Actor for Jeffrey Wright, Best Performance by a Supporting Actor for Sterling K. Brown, Best Achievement in Music or Original Score, composed by Laura Cartman. It was also nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. And that's it. 5 nominations.
Yeah, pretty good.
American Fiction.
Pretty good nominations.
Yeah. But a very good group of nominations that kind of covers all the different aspects of it. And also in each of those aspects, the aspects that I would certainly praise about this film. I think that I really, really like American Fiction. I think that its style of comedy and drama and how it synthesized those really, really appeals to me. I think that the dry sense of humor and the way that the jokes like land and the music stops and like is like looking at the camera. I found that to be really, really appealing, especially the first time when this movie likes to do such crazy things with its humor where it's like comes out of left field. And it had us really laughing in the theater and reliving those jokes on a second watch. I was like, man, yeah, this is really, really cleverly written. And I love the score. I love the ensemble of performances. I think that it's just so interesting how this film merges writing and talking about writing and culture and talking about culture and then also drama and also comedy. I think it's a really great film, and I just a lot of fun and provides some interesting things to think about.
Abram.
Timo?
Or me?
Oh.
Me?
No, holy shit. Oh, whoa.
Okay.
Tenor.
Donkey.
Timo, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, so this is my first viewing of it. Watched it earlier today, and I'm kind of two minds of this film. I found it to be entertaining and somewhat funny. I think other people in the theater that I was in found it funnier than I did because people were laughing at the jokes, and I laughed at a couple of them, but it wasn't like uproariously funny. It is dry. It's wry humor.
Absolutely.
And some of it works pretty well, but I kind of am taking a lot of big issues with this here political messaging of this movie. And I think it's like you're going down the right path, but you have merely begun to choose to go down the right path and not actually like walk down it. I think that this film is one that's really trying to be very politically conscious, and I don't know exactly like how well it satisfies me in it. It's just kind of like not vapid, but it's close to vapid. Like where is the final statement that this film is trying to make? I think it makes a compelling intermediate statement, one that's like getting us on the way, but I don't know if it actually reaches a satisfying conclusion with the idea of how does entertainment and race play together, and how is our society choosing to view both of those things and talk about them and what to highlight. So I think there are some really creative moments in this film. I think there's a couple of moments that do have that like kind of like score, like the humor plus the shot plus the score like combines pretty well to make like a very, very awkward, very cringy moment that comes across well. But I don't know. I'm kind of lukewarm on it. It's like, yeah, it's funny and Jeffrey Wright's good, but does this political message not landing super well like outweigh those things? I don't know. They're kind of equal for me right now.
Sure.
Yeah, I liked American Fiction significantly less on my rewatch. And I think I echo a lot of what you're feeling, Timo, when it comes to the actual message of the movie. I find it to be very funny. I think the entertainment value of American Fiction is quite high. I think particularly Sterling K. Brown does a phenomenal job. I think Jeffrey Wright does as well, but I think that Sterling K. Brown is sort of to another level in the nuance and how he can deliver drama and comedy. I think just and shine in those moments more than maybe anyone else in the cast for me. So I love the experience of being in the film for the most part, but I think I also I'm kind of going to take two problems. Take a problem from you,
Okay.
and I'm going to take a problem from you, Timo. I think that the balance of the film is not quite right. I think that the family drama is by turns less interesting than the cultural, racial, political drama and satire. But the satire, I feel, is also less effective in how it's delivered and what it's saying than the familial drama.
Right.
So it's this weird position for me where I think that the film doesn't play to its strongest material, but the material it does play to, it plays to better. And I also, I find Monk's politics inscrutable in a lot of ways.
Sure.
I find the larger message of the film, which I want to talk about in great detail, to be pretty clear, but also like filmically unsatisfying for the progression of Monk as a character, as I want to talk about. But I think on the way towards what I see as the ultimate message of the movie, we get really muddled with a lot of asides and comments and digressions that I think color how progressive I even feel like this movie is or is trying to be. So I've got a lot I'm curious to discuss further about American Fiction.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So where should we start, gentlemen? Do we start with Thelonious himself, or Timo, what were you going to say?
Abram brought up the point about I'm going to say the pacing or the structure of this film, and these two parts, I think, of how the plot operates. We have our book plot, which is about Monk being fed up with the industry, being fed up with this one other author specifically, who he clearly thinks is a poser and is writing from an inauthentic voice about the Black experience. And the Black experience is using accentized writing. It is using, very, very stereotypical. This film, in its satire, is very ham-fisted, but I don't think that it's to its detriment. It's just slamming you with it so that you understand and really it can be very clear about this one idea. And I think that is what this film was marketed as. So this is what I was expecting to see going into the film. But what I think that a lot of the film really is this family drama of how the real life of these people are playing out. And I think that creates an interesting conflict within this film in which it is asking us to see these fake stories, these fictions that have been written. I think the title, this is the one movie of this year where I'm like really diving into the title. I think the title matters a lot for this one more than it does on the other ones.
Oppenheimer.
Yeah, it's like
that one's pretty accurate, to be fair. That one's pretty accurate, too.
So the fiction we are shown of this idea that Monk comes up with and then writes, but then we're also shown and spent a great lot of length of the movie and I think a lot of care in the craft of the film to this family drama, the real life, the real struggle of upper middle class Black Americans. And so while I think Abram is right that it doesn't, I feel I am less interested. The story really kicks into overdrive when we're with the book. The book is like the interesting conceit. Like the family drama is where this film is trying to make its heart lie. And I'm like kind of, I don't know. I don't know how satisfied I am with that because like do these stories intersect in a way that is more like textual? Is a way that like the family drama impacts the book drama and the book drama impacts the family drama. The book drama does impact the family drama a little bit, but I don't think the reverse happens. And so it's like, what are these two things trying to tell us? I want to synthesize them. I want to be able to put the two ideas together. And so far, I'm only really able to be like, well, the real life is there is real life, and it's a struggle, and it's complicated, and it's normal. It's not like in the hood, and it's not like getting killed by cops and all this stuff. The stereotype that I think this film is like trying to defeat.
Sure.
What do you guys make of these two ideas, the plot lines, I guess?
Team, I totally agree with where you're coming from, especially on the point of how they don't feel like they ever. It's kind of like Cord Jefferson laid out these two plots, and he said, "Never the twain shall meet." Mm-hmm. I feel like there's not a lot of specific crossover between what Monk is doing in his professional life and what Monk is dealing with in his personal life. And I feel like it's not exactly essential, but I feel like there's especially some interesting drama to be drilled out from there, because I'm not going to say like they never interconnect, because obviously they do. A key scene in this film is when he is sort of like drunkenly and belligerently yelling at his newfound girlfriend about her reading fuck and enjoying it, and how he says, this flattens our stories and so on and so forth. And he's like, I can't believe that you're enjoying this. The implication there being that he's like, I wrote this as like a fuck you. It's like intentionally garbage and exploitative. And I can't believe that you are actively and earnestly enjoying this. Yeah. There are a handful of moments like that in the film. And ultimately, my issue with the film is not that, this crossover never happens. It just feels like something that could derive some deeper meaning out of the the satire that I find we're going to be talking a lot more about in this review. Sure. So with that in mind, I'd like to first talk about the familial drama. Because
I want to respond to the balance of the two. Okay. Because I actually agree, and I think the part that is... I agree and I disagree. Okay. I agree that it feels like the conflict and the narrative stuff that would come out of exposing this to his family members, and how does that impact his psychology and the relationships between him and his girlfriend or his brother or, the people around him. Right. That is all stuff I would love to see. It would be very interesting, and I think it would end up being, to your point, more satisfying by the end of the film. But I do think that I disagree in that for the length of the film, I am satisfied that the two don't meet that often, because it isn't very intentional, I think, in the writing and in Monk's character that he wants this separate. Yeah, he's not telling his family about it. He feels like it does not authentically represent himself, that he did do this. He's awkward about it. He's trying to push it away and push it under the covers.
It's very much aligned with the curmudgeonly sort of demeanor that Jeffrey Wright embodies very well.
Yeah, and that even carries over into the fact that he wrote it under a pseudonym, and then even when Stag Arley is like is talking to someone or being on screen, he's either completely hidden in shadow or he's using an exaggerated voice or an accent or vernacular that is hiding his identity, and he's not comfortable with that. So I think the fact that two don't meet is good for what this story tells for the an hour and 45 minutes of this movie, but the movie skips over dealing with the implications of it coming out and him having to deal with talking to people about this and explaining that. And it does it, I think, in a fun and creative way. Yes. The last 10, 15 minutes of this movie are, what if we rewrote this ending? How does that play into writing a movie ending versus the writer? How does he feel about that? And I do like that, but it is just true that the drama of the two intersecting is intentionally avoided. Yeah. And I think that is both a positive for what the movie is going for in the majority of its runtime, but a criticism of where it intentionally lacks and avoids that tension.
Far be it from us to criticize a movie for what it isn't, for scenes that maybe Cord Jefferson never thought of or thought were necessary for the film.
I mean, I hear you, but I ultimately think that I do want to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's a totally valid form of criticism.
And the reason I want to do that is because my problem with this balance is that I feel like the scenes omitted are the ones that extract more out of Monk's character. And that's ultimately my issue, because I feel like the way the narrative is constructed, Monk has a secret. And the movie is,
Monk has a secret.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what we're operating with here.
Yeah,
We're operating
yeah.
with a character who's living two lives.
Mhm.
But
It's like Spider-Man 2 in some ways.
my problem with it ultimately is that
Stag our lead no more. Sorry, continue, April.
so much of the time we spend with Monk's family, I don't feel like we learn more about Monk in the process. Like, I think that his relationship with Coraline, I apologize.
That's just the character's name.
I don't think that is motivating to me as an audience member, because I don't think we get much out of it other than the moment you mentioned, Tanner, that sort of progresses Monk's character or forces a new dimension out of him.
Sure.
The character who gets the most out of Monk and pushes him the hardest is Sterling K. Brown's character, Cliff, his brother.
And I would say his sister at the beginning as well.
Yeah, definitely. But of course, she's dies
dispatched quite quickly.
15 minutes into the film.
She's fridged.
Jesus Christ. So I think you're left with this situation wherein Sterling K. Brown, I feel like when they're bouncing off of each other, Monk is put in this place where he has to be uncomfortable. But I don't think you really get that out of a lot of the family material. And in the absence of, to your point, Tucker, the implication of the story getting out, because the people around him are largely uncritical of where he gets his money, where he's spending his time, etc. I'm just left feeling like there's a clear disjunction here, in that some scenes that we could infuse back into the narrative would push Monk further.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also do think that maybe there's more of it than you maybe realize in terms of characterization in that family plot. Because I do feel that each of the supporting characters, outside of Lorraine, who is their housekeeper, longtime housekeeper that ends up getting married, all that, she's not a character that introduces any tension. She's a very soft and loving figure in the movie. But every other character that he talks to, I think, does bring out different elements of his personality that allow us to learn a little bit more, because what we know Monk to be in the scenes without his family is very matter of fact, straight to the point, doesn't want to deal with anyone's bullshit, thinks everyone else is bullshitting him because he's talking to other teachers or other writers or to his boss / publisher or whatever.
Or students.
Other students. Yeah. And that is the persona that Monk puts on. But I do think that watching him just go through relatively normal scenes with his family, whether that's the drama with his brother and his sexuality, or the fact that he's more aggressive than his brother, or the history they had together, we learn a lot about Monk, the way that he grew up, the way that he approaches talking to people, the way that he was as a kid, that shaped the way that his brother and sister and mother treated him over the years. I think there is a lot in there that is always putting him in an uncomfortable scenario, which is why I think you do learn so much, because Monk explicitly says that he does not like being around his family. And because of this drama, not only his sister passing away, but his mother dealing with Alzheimer's, he's forced to be around them a lot more. And so when he's with his mother and has to be a caring figure for seemingly the first time in his life, because his mother is dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's, that brings out a side of his personality. And when he's forced to reconcile a lot of things with his brother's divorce, his brother's sexuality, their history with their dad, that I think brings a lot out of him, because Thelonious Monk Ellison is not comfortable with talking about these things, but he is put into these situations where other characters that are more steadfast and we need to talk about this. Primarily his sister, she does a lot of this, bringing up things that he wouldn't want to talk about otherwise, pointing out things about his history, about his personality, about the way that he interacts with people. I think there's a lot that comes out of these family scenes that is very intentionally not the way that he is portrayed in the other things. And I think you would barely know anything about Monk as a person from just seeing him in these business relationship writing teacher scenes. The family stuff is where you really learn who Monk is as a person. And I think it's very, very important.
Well, yeah, no, of course. And like I said, there's a reason why Cord Jefferson splits the film the way he does, I feel. Whether consciously or unconsciously, I think there's maybe perhaps a recognition that the satire doesn't deliver a full sort of knife-twisting message about, about the things that the film is about, as we'll get to. And Tucker, you're correct that obviously we learn more about Monk from his familial relationships, as we do with oftentimes any character in any film. And I would agree that a lot of times I find, Sterling K. Brown has the most screen time of any of the supporting performances anyway, so that makes sense as to why we get the most relationship development out of Cliff and Monk, because ultimately the familial drama is building to this sort of crescendo, this lesson, this thematic crux, whatever you want to call it, wherein, and this is shared between both halves of the film as we're sort of describing it, that you can't let other people sort of write your story. You can't let people tell you, whether it be your family or society or whoever, who you are. You have to like sort of divine that out yourself, and from the people and from the things that you do, forge your own identity, separate from the things that maybe we are told that we are, maybe the things that we grow up to think we are becoming. With the familial relationships, that is, Monk is told a number of times in this film that Monk, you're just like your dad. You're just like our dad. Our dad did this. Our dad did that. And you're also doing this. And you're a lot closer with our dad than we were. Like, ultimately, all of it is building around this absent father figure from the film and from much of the family's life as we come to understand it. And how Monk has to not be that, essentially. Be more open with his family. Be more emotionally available to the people in his life. And, not run out on them with some white woman that he was kissing in the park or whatever.
I agree with you guys. I just think that ultimately my issue is so much of what we're talking about is for Sterling K. Brown's character of Cliff. Even when I think about the plot line of taking their mother to the care home.
Yeah.
Monk doesn't really have to or often interact with his mom. Obviously, there is that moment at the end where they have one final exchange where he asks his mother if she knew that she was being cheated on. But for the most part, the progression...
Even, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Yeah. Even then, she thinks... The last line of the interaction is she thinks she's talking to Cliff.
Right. Yeah. And this is sort of my issue with the family stuff. The progression of their mother's illness forces Cliff back into the family and forces Cliff to reconcile with his relationship with his father and with his mother. It doesn't really force Monk to do that. It forces Cliff to learn things about himself that he then challenges Monk on, which is why I love the relationship of Cliff and Monk. But why I'm not sold on the screen time that the family narrative takes ultimately, because Monk's few challenges with his mother boil down to, how am I going to pay for the home? Well, here comes the money. And then most of the scenes wherein we see the mother is with Cliff. And the most affecting scenes are with Cliff when the mother is being homophobic towards Cliff when they're dancing. These are moments for Cliff. They're not moments for Monk. And that's my issue with the family stuff. Not that it's not important, because I think it's critical to the film, but it's why I think, for me, again, as I was saying at the beginning, Cliff is really where that's how the movie shines for me, and where I think Sterling K. Brown's excellent performance is put to such great use.
Yeah. Timo, what are your thoughts on the whole family drama of American fiction?
My whole thoughts are that it just doesn't connect or lead to what I believe this film is really trying to say. Like, if I have to work so hard to divine out a meaning that comprises both halves of the film, I feel like it's not succeeding on everything that it sets out to do, because I quite clearly see what the film is trying to do with the other half, with our book section. And even though I have my issues with that, it's like, I get it. I know what's happening. It's clear enough. And the meaning with the family stuff is, I think, certainly more realistic, but it is like not constructing any further understanding of the situation of what is it like to be a Black American? What is it like to tell a Black American story? Why should me, a white guy, care about such a thing? That's what this film was like promising me, I feel like. So the family stuff is entertaining, and I think that's where we get the comedic performances shine. But what does it lead to? I don't think it leads to a whole lot.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I'm curious to now shift our focus a little bit. We can bounce back whenever I want to, but to think about the overarching message of the film for a moment. Because we've been sort of talking about how we know what the movie's trying to say. Not said what we think the movie's trying to say.
Okay.
I have a really hard time pinning down, like I said at the beginning, the political leaning of this film. But my reading and why I find it to be maybe a pragmatic message, but a filmically dissatisfying message, is that the arc Monk progresses through starts at a point, and I was explaining my thoughts on the film to Tanner.
We had a little. Amber and I had a little like
we did a pre-quest.
little quest like shadow boxing. After we finished the movie last night.
We did. At the beginning of the film, Monk is writing a book that is based on the Persians, and it is rejected from publisher after publisher. His agents trying to shop it around because, in the words of the literary agent, the book is not black enough.
Yeah.
And
it's like the line of the trailer that is what is trying to put your butt in the seat. It's like, what does that mean?
I am black. It is my book.
Yes.
Right. And Monk is unwilling to compromise the material that he's working on to suit white America and get his book published. The film ends by him acquiescing.
Yeah.
Explicit to the ending of the film is Monk making the choice to bend the creative knee for the sake of Adam Brody, the producer, to get his movie made. And so essentially, across the hour 45 minutes of American fiction, to me, the biggest character progression from Monk is that he learns to capitulate to the whims of white America to make money. And I don't necessarily think that is...
he complains about it the whole time.
Right. And here's where it gets nuanced, I think. I don't think that what they are saying is wrong.
Yeah, of course.
On a this is the world we live in level.
Yeah.
I think that it is an accurate illustration of how black stories are exploited and told in popular culture.
Blaxploitation.
Yes.
Yeah. Someone should make that genre.
That's a good idea.
Get on that, Cord Jefferson.
We should do that.
My ultimate problem, though, is that I don't think as a viewer that is a narratively satisfying thing.
Yeah,
now, ultimately,
I get that.
if you want to purposely subvert my satisfaction, I get that, and I think that there's a clear rhetorical purpose for that. But when you add in this whole exchange between Jeffrey Wright and Issa Rae, when they are basically, what Tanner said to me last night, shooting past each other with various remarks, from Monk saying everything from, I'm tired of black people rapping, to Issa Rae saying, I'm just trying to make money under capitalism. I have an extremely hard time trying to figure out if my reading of the film is correct and what everything in the periphery is even trying to say.
Yes. I mean, Abram, as you and I discussed for like 20 minutes last night, I agree. Ultimately, you're right. I think that what we sort of landed on, and I want to hear, Tucker and Timo, your perspective on this as well, is that it is quite a sort of pragmatic look at things. And ultimately, what the film lands on is Monk throwing his hands up and saying, what can you do?
Yeah.
You can't fight back against it, and when you try to undercut it, when you try to be so outwardly stupid and in your face with, hey, I'm making fun of the thing you do, they still celebrate it. They give you awards. They laud you. They put you on their shoulders. It's like, well, then what else is there to do ultimately?
It's structural analysis without any suggestion for change ultimately, which is okay, I guess.
Yeah, I think that I don't necessarily find that. Well, I think you guys are absolutely right that this movie does not come down on anything, and the points that it brings up and the characters that it focuses on add complications to this. The reason why I can see that as a criticism, but I don't feel that as a criticism while I'm watching the film or thinking about it, is because I view the pragmatic element of it to be the point of this film.
Naturally,
and not coming down on a specific side or a specific point for change or anything. I don't. It's certainly not necessary for my enjoyment of the film, and not taking that route, I think feels kind of fresh to me. And the fact that it is about a complicated guy who I would say acquiescing is definitely true when it comes to the business sense, but I think in the larger sense of the film and Monk as a character mixing in with the family element, it's more him learning to work better with others and learn to understand that you need to find middle ground. And that is true in the relationships with his mother when he has to be a caring figure for the first time, even though he's always been trying to push that off onto other people. It's true with his brother when they finally start talking about their past a little bit more and respecting each other on a deeper level. Having what seems to be one of the first like actual good relationships in his life, having to make compromises there. Those, I think, are mirrored by the fact that he has to make compromises in his business life as well. And what we know about Monk from the first scene of the movie is he's an uncompromising person who's committed to his vision. That makes him interesting. It makes him aggressive. It makes him distinct. But it does make him tough to work with, tough to like. And by the end of the film, I feel that the business element and the family element have both come down the side of it's better for everyone for you to make some take some leeway in your business and admit that you're wrong in your family life and things like that. And so yeah, I think the message is more, and the whole point of this is a kind of story that is a meta narrative that is focused on storytelling, that we are just pointing a camera at the fact that this has not been really talked about before in this aggressive and point blank of a way. That Black stories are repetitive and that there is this slavery, getting shot by the cops, ghetto stories, and even the it's like Black History Month.
Yes,
on the TV thing,
celebrating Black stories.
Yeah.
The film is full of jokes like that, and they all land. They're always funny. Even on a rewatch, I was laughing at them. Avery and I were laughing at them, just like we were in the theater. Those jokes always work because, again, like Monk writing the book itself, it's so in your face, it's so clear in what it's satirizing and what it's undercutting. And credit to all the sort of like bit players, the bit actors in the role as well, mostly these white upper class elite sort of book publishing agents and stuff like that. They play those characters so well, where they're like, oh yes, well, I mean, there's so many moments that I can bring out, but like when he says, "Oh yeah, white people in the Hamptons are gonna love it," and then the lady says, "Oh yes, we will." I mean, they will. I mean, we're very excited.
There's also the moment where he's like, "Oh, it's something about it." And he's like, "It's very black." He's like, "Well, I'm glad you said it, not me." I'm like,
exactly.
That's a great line.
See, and it's all like it's not like I don't want to say it's not clever, but it's all such like. The characters are so well defined. The characters are so like it's the oblivious white people that he's tricking. We have to make the more oblivious you make them, the more smart you make Monk seem, and the more ridiculous the entire scenario is ultimately.
Yeah.
And so when I come down, the comedy is obviously quite strong. It is the thing of like, yes, pragmatism is I guess. It's a cogent sort of landing spot for the film to sort of find itself at the end of its hour 45 minutes.
Tanner.
Yeah, you disagree?
I'm gonna disagree. I just don't.
Okay.
So we're not talking about some like small fry issue here. Like,
fair.
The film is attempting to tackle a rather large and a rather important and culturally forefronted idea that racism exists and that it permeates to all different parts of our society. And this film is drilling in on entertainment and story. And so to me, like the Monk acquiescing at the end, I'll be out with it, is like I completely disagree with that sentiment from like a moral political standpoint, because that's not like, how are you going to solve this? It's just that, like, I guess it's pragmatic, but it's also just like status quo. It's just like, let's just accept this how it is because I made my bank. That's like a really liberal, like a really mainstream way
your head's gonna fall off your shoulders.
It's just like, it's so mainstream way to think about it. And for a film that's like, it's trying to satirize. It's trying to push some boundaries here. Like, to come down as that being your final resting spot just is disappointing, because, and it's like, you're even setting it up like, oh, that moment that you guys talked about between Monk and between Jeffrey Wright and Issa Rae at the end, where Monk is asking about the book and really interrogating her. That scene was good. I liked it, but it left me wanting a lot more. I really wanted to get this, like, let's be intelligent and let's interrogate who you two people are and what it is that you're, like, seemingly, the movie tries to make these two books be the same-ish thing, because we see it all from Monk's perspective. Like we don't, I guess, have like a super objective view of this, but the way that Monk views this, the book by Issa Rae's character,
Sintara.
Sintara Golden. She is. He's like, yeah, you just like made that up. Yeah, you're just being, you know, insincere about it. And the film makes a point to say that her character is like as equally educated, as equally economically situated, I'd say, because I think that this film asks you to engage in questions of like, what is privilege? How much privilege do people have? And while I think it's reductive to try to be like, well, you have more privilege than you do, and thus you're more just, like, that's stupid. But the interrogation of the actual content of these books is incomplete, I think. And that's like the setup of this whole movie, is that this book is being inauthentic, but it's still selling. And even the part where the two, I think this is actually well done in that scene, is like right after they're done arguing, the two black people get shut out of the conversation by white people telling them that they need to listen to black people more. That's well done, but it's like, it's just a punchline. It's not that there's meat there. There's like some really interesting, who are we and what is the purpose of the writer, of the story creator? Like, are they able, do we as a society want to let them create anything? Or do we want to force them to write what they are? And I think that,
oh my God, I want to jump in quickly. Sorry, and Timo, I don't mean to cut you off, because you're chomping at the bit there, okay? And I want to let you jump in. But I just want to like to clear up a statement I made. I said that the pragmatism as the resolution there is cogent. I don't know if that was the right word, but what I really mean there is that, like, it makes sense narratively. Like, it's not like a fumbled ending completely.
Because I think that,
I don't think it lives up to the brunt and the force that the satire has been building to, as I'm sure we'll talk about. And everyone wants to talk about too.
It works narratively because of the character of Monk. Monk's character and the way that he feels about the whole storyline makes it so that I think we accept it.
Yeah, I think the part of the reason it feels ineffective is because whether you call it sort of a parable about compromise or about status quo, there's a very nefarious undercurrent there, because this movie is essentially about like the capitalist exploitation of race and racialized storytelling.
Yeah.
So I think that you can't ignore that. Now, I work in a creative field, and I know that you have to compromise for an audience, but I'm also white and I'm writing about video games. So, okay, if I had to take away from this film, I need to compromise my art. Well, that's not really useful, I don't think.
Sure.
The problem with this ending is that Issa Rae's character of Sintara is, in the framework that this film sets up, the most idealized author you could be. She, within the confines of this structure, is extremely successful for herself. And the film chooses to give Sintara so little screen time that you really just understand her book as something that Monk hates. And then you have this brief period of time wherein Sintara talks about, like, basically ways to make her labor effective. And because that's the only scene where you humanize her at all, it leads me to think that essentially Monk has to become more like Sintara to succeed. And he does. But that's weird. I think it's ultimately weird. And we mentioned in our last episode, is this year's Don't Look Up. And I'm going to say something really crazy for a moment.
Oh, no.
Don't Look Up is a much less effective piece of environmental activism than Avatar: The Way of Water.
Sure, okay.
Because Avatar: The Way of Water galvanizes you to the issue, and it makes you want to fight for ecological causes.
Right.
Don't Look Up assesses a problem and ends the film with the assessment.
Abram, I gotta say, I thought you were gonna say that Don't Look Up is a better satire.
No.
Okay. Well, I'm a little relieved.
This movie, American Fiction, is in the Don't Look Up category. It wants to assess a problem, but then it wants to end the film by giving our character what they want, which is a career.
Or death.
But by acquiescing and just remaining in this position where the stories are repackaged through the eyes of somebody like Adam Brody. And I think that if you can leave the film thinking, okay, well, it's good that Monk got his movie made, the entire actual film, American Fiction, is being ineffective in trying to communicate anything. I think a better American Fiction illustrates, to use a word they use in the movie, the urgency of the problem. That nothing has changed, and that Monk has to capitulate to the desire of Adam Brody to succeed. This movie doesn't electrify or motivate anything. It just says, here's the status quo. Isn't it cool that Monk became more like Centaura and made money within it? In my opinion.
So I'll say that while I share a lot of the criticisms, I don't think that the film was being like, hey, it's cool that Monk did this.
No, I don't think so either.
Okay, yeah. Just so we're on the same page there. It's kind of what we said. It's kind of what I opened this up with. It's like Monk is essentially throwing up his hands and saying, what else can you do? I tried to be so clear and biting in what I was doing. They bought it hook, line, and sinker, and it's gonna win an Oscar. And so that's what the implication is, or whatever.
The last thing I'll say is, because you are right. Yeah, Monk is not happy about this, and as Monk is leaving the backlot with Cliff, he sees the black man who is on set for what you assume is some sort of period piece slavery film.
He's on set for Plantation Annihilation.
Right, Plantation Annihilation, right. And he's got his AirPods in, and he flashes a peace sign, and the movie ends. So I understand that is a souring note, but I think that when you're talking about a comedy and your main character is a curmudgeonly guy, the curmudgeonly guy being a curmudgeonly guy as the movie ends, I think it doesn't really hammer home the implicit nefariousness of what the movie is saying at the end. Sure. That's ultimately my problem.
I mean, I just find it ultimately cynical. It's a cynical film, and I think that's fine. And I think that's a fine thing for a film to be.
And I think that's ultimately the reason why, even though I think that all these, I mean, frankly, I wasn't thinking about any of these points of the politics, but I do ultimately agree now that you've sort of laid them out for me. And I do think that does hamper my enjoyment of the potential that this film could have fully realized. I totally understand being disappointed from that, but I think through watching the film, as someone who I view myself as more of a cynical person, watching a film that has ultimately a pragmatic and cynical viewpoint on this and just wants to tell an interesting story about a guy in this system, I feel that is where the intent and the execution of American Fiction lie, and why I would say it doesn't miss its mark. It misses the idealized potential mark of what the idea of this film can be. But I do feel that Cord Jefferson and this creative team had the idea of, this is a story within this system, and it is not aiming to dismantle it or to push things forward in like a radicalized way, but being cynical about it, like, yeah, this is just a story that can be told and has not been told before, and let's do it in the best way that we can with a great ensemble of characters and interesting interpersonal relationships. And I think the film really succeeds in that. And so I don't knock the film too hard for not being the ultimate liberal version of what this message could be portrayed as. Instead, it's executing on its own intent as a cynical movie within the structure that it's a part of.
Timo, sorry, were you going to say something there before we cut you off over here?
I was, but it is escaped from my mind. Okay. It's okay. Something along the lines of like nope, it's gone. I was about to pull it back from the ether, but I could feel it's just slipping out.
the last thing, when you're about to speak, we were talking if this helps at all about Monk's reaction as the film ends, and Monk being dissatisfied.
Yeah, actually, what I was kind of gonna jump. I did.
Rolled it in.
The ether. I've ventured through it. That the film doesn't position the success of Monk, I think, as like a bad thing, or it doesn't position that success in a very like deft way, in a way that is like easy to understand, in that like he is unhappy, but he's got his money and he's solved his family problems. I mean, it's not like a good solution, but they're not like major problems anymore. And so I think that it's quite easy to read it as a happy ending, even though that I really think the message of the film needs it to be an unhappy ending. That it needs.
I don't know. I disagree in that. I think it being a happy ending is narratively satisfying for the arc of Monk as a character, because again, tying back to what I was mentioning earlier, his problem is that at the beginning of the film is that he doesn't work well with others and he's entirely uncompromising. And by the end, now that he has learned to compromise with people and capitulate in certain scenarios, he has reconnected with his family. He has found solutions to help other people in his mother, which, as we see at the beginning of the movie, he's not someone who usually helps other people or puts other people before himself. And so as the film ends and he's gotten money that will help his mother be comfortable until she dies of her illness, that is a positive trait that he has gained across the course of the movie. And he has reconnected with his brother, which is the last thing that the film ends on. Is there's not a ton of context for it, but he's in Hollywood making a movie and his brother is also there. And so I think you can make the assumption that they have reconnected in a tight enough way to where Cliff will come pick him up from the back lot, which obviously would not have happened before this movie, before the plot of American Fiction. And so I think it is a happy ending. It is soured by the context, and I think intentionally so, because it is not a fully good or like politically pushing radical thing that he has done, but it is a happy ending because he feels more satisfied as a person, having reconnected with his family and learned something about himself, that he does not need to always be uncompromising and push away other people. I think one of the best lines in the movie is when Coraline says, you need to learn that pushing away other people is not a badge of honor. And that is ultimately the point of American Fiction, is that this guy being a curmudgeon is not a good thing. And in this system and with a family that is complicated, he can learn to make compromise. What do you look at the faces he's making? That's where the film ends.
You've inspired an idea within me. American Fiction, right? The title of the film. What is the fiction that it is talking about? What is this so American made up story? What is it? Well, if we take your point, Tucker, that it is that the film's message is to learn to like work with others and be nice to your family and be a part of a community, that the American Fiction is sort of an individualism, that there is a bit of a falsehood to this American idea of being just a single person. And that in reality, you actually can't exist as just a single person, and you need to rely on others a little bit.
Yeah. So my point was more that I think it is maybe politically unsatisfying that it is a happy ending, but I think it is narratively and emotionally satisfying for Monk as a character that it is a happy ending.
I would agree. And here's so I've been trying to I've had a lot of points sort of fly into my brain. I'm going to try and tie them all together here as sort of like
like a rubber band ball.
Yeah, exactly. As sort of like my closing thought on the whole satire thing, because there is other aspects of the film that I want to talk about. This is Cord Jefferson's first film that he's directed. It's the directorial debut. He's existed in Hollywood largely as a writer for 10 plus years. And recently, he's worked
on... 10?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. A lot of swears in this for a 10-year-old, by the way. Anyway, he's written, he's worked on a lot of shows, such as the recent HBO Watchmen show, which had, heavy racial themes to it. As I understand it, I actually haven't seen the show, but there's lots of themes of like white supremacy and things like that are drawn out in that show, largely under his purview. And I think what's really interesting about the ending of American Fiction is that when Monk goes to Adam Brody at the end, and his character's name is Wiley, but we keep referring to him as Adam Brody because he's Adam Brody. When he goes to him at the end, he eventually essentially recounts and produces, we assume, the film American Fiction.
Yeah.
The same, except for the ending, wherein Jeffrey Wright gets ventilated by the FBI.
In a hilariously over-the-top scene.
Exactly. And I think what Cord Jefferson is sort of doing is that he's like, in the Hollywood system that I've worked in for a decade plus, this is the kind of thing that white producers would be happy with. It's the kind of thing that's going to win an Oscar. And what's quite hopeful to me, ultimately, in a meta sense, is that American Fiction, as the film that exists as we know it, is the film that's being awarded and being celebrated, and that it was made. Period. A film that sort of undercuts this narrative and sort of pokes fun at the sensibilities of white producers, white editors, what have you.
And so, in itself and in its success, is kind of that boundary pushing nature.
Exactly.
Yeah. Even if it isn't ultimately the most successful version of it.
And Cord Jefferson, as I said, this is his first directorial feature, and it's imperfect, but it's also quite good, and I enjoy it a whole lot. He's not Spike Lee, and if you want Spike Lee's American Fiction, he did. He made a film called Bamboozled that's essentially about the same things. I've heard it brought up many times in podcasts that I've heard about this film and in interviews with Cord Jefferson. Another film that gets brought up in that same breath is something like Hollywood Shuffle.
I've got a signed copy by
of
Spike Lee of Bamboozled over there. He signed it.
But my point being that there are potentially more or better versions of this story that all of us would be more satisfied with because none of us have seen those films. Have you seen Bamboozled?
Yeah, I watched Bamboozled. I own it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it's signed.
Yeah.
I cannot watch it.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. The majority of us have not seen those works. But yeah, that's kind of my point, is that for a directorial debut, I think what Cord Jefferson does here is solid, imperfect, but also illuminates a lot of creative foresight and intellectual thinking on his part.
I do agree, and I do want to underline that. I mean, ultimately, I think our ability to have this conversation, in the first place, is a testament to the lengths that Cord Jefferson goes to imbue this film with a deeper quality. Even if I don't agree that it's a necessarily effective one, I think that this film, because I sometimes like to think about like the purpose of a film, its purpose as a discussion starter, I think at least gets people in the right direction, which I think is very useful. And I do think that when we look at this beyond the political nature of it and we look at other elements of the film, it is very impressive what has been put together here. Again, the ensemble's comedic timing is great. The use of the score, I know you love the score. I also love the score. I think it's a very watchable movie. And that's a quality that I don't think can be overlooked.
Yeah.
So I do think
we
that's
watched Zone of Interest recently too. That's not a watchable movie. Sure. So I agree. I think that I would classify my feelings on American Fiction as a whole as messy, but there's a lot of very good parts in the messiness too, I would say.
Yeah.
I'll shout out a moment that I particularly like in when Jeffrey Wright's all fed up about everything, and he's like, all right, and there's a quick montage of him getting his writing set up, and he starts to write, and the silly little characters in his head come out into the real world, and we see the scene play out. I think, and then the moments where the guys like the actors break character to ask him questions, and then he thinks aloud to how they're gonna act, and then there's like a pause, and then boom, we're like back into the scene. I think that is a really smartly done. I think it's like kind of an obvious way to depict writing, but why haven't I seen it before? So you get, originality comes first. So
it's kind of like an Argyle style.
Yes, it is. But ultimately what I want to circle back around to is that, yes, we can throw all these barbs at the sort of the deeper political context of what the implications of American Fiction are, when at its forefront, it's it's a solid satire on a broader scope, and it's just blatantly very funny. Just in its moment-to-moment character just firing jokes at each other. It's very good. I wrote down like a dozen of them in my notes, just like things that I was like, God, that's a great joke. God, that's a great line. When they're talking about Cliff giving the family fucking what does he give them? Oxycodone.
Yeah.
He gives them oxycodone. He's like, yeah, you ever seen a heroin addict? They fucking take naps standing up. I'm not flying the fucking plane, monk.
Yeah.
I always loved that line delivery from Sterling K. Brown. And again, I want to circle back to his performance as well. He's great. I really gained an appreciation for him and his character in this film on the second watch, because he is, as we sort of talked about, the character that Monk can relate to the most and the one he has to kind of heal with the most. And he of course, Cliff ties into this whole theme of like owning yourself, owning your narrative, as he sort of has to come into his own as a gay man in his mid-40s, essentially.
Yeah.
And by God, is Sterling K. Brown in fucking fantastic shape. He is ripped to fucking shit and back. He's built like a shit brick house over here. It's incredible.
Brick house.
Mm-hmm.
He does let it all hang out. That is true. That's a good reference, Timo.
Mm-hmm.
When he jumps up out of the pool, we were marking
Yes.
to each other yesterday.
Yes.
But I think what's great about Sterling K. Brown is not only does he have great timing with "I'm not flying the fucking plane" and things like that, he's able to have these dimensions of sadness in his performance that I think are exceptional. When he's leaving Coraline and Monk's house, and Coraline says, "It was nice to meet you, Cliff," and he turns around and just says, "This family will break you or break your heart," is what he says. He hits those moments as effectively.
Yeah.
I think
and then in the moment when his mother says, "I knew you weren't queer," and he like, you can just see him stop, back away, and like look at Monk / at the camera with like just so much emotion on his face. It's a phenomenal moment of acting.
I think he's completely captivating. I think that Jeffrey Wright is also really good. Jeffrey Wright is just more subtle, I think, in his performance. I don't think he doesn't have the emotional, by merit of how his character operates and moves through the world, he doesn't have the emotional range and opportunity that Sterling K. Brown does.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, and I think that's why, for me, Jeffrey Wright as Monk is one of my favorite performances of last year, is because he is so subtle, but there are these moments where he cracks just a tiny bit, and he's put into a situation where he's so uncomfortable and he has to like think on his feet. And even though he's a really smart guy who's used to writing characters in all sorts of situations, he's also not really that good at thinking on his feet. And so you can see the cogs turning. And and frankly, I find him a very relatable character, because he's someone who, when he's thinking, he like focuses and like furrows his brow and like stares off into space. And that's something that I do as well. And like, and I love the way that he like just like sits there with like half a scowl on his face for like the entire movie. But that half of the scowl, depending on the situation that he's in, can mean so many different things. And I just think it's such a remarkable way to teach me about a character without him saying almost anything about himself. He never really talks about his own past. He never really, frankly, doesn't really ask other people very many questions. But because...
And when he does, they're as his sister points out, a very condescending manner that he just wants to insult people with.
Absolutely. And it makes him a very distinct character. But I think the way that he's written into these scenes with other characters that are more emotionally intelligent and can ask him the questions or remind him of something and force him to admit something or force him to reconcile with something that he said in the past or did, and like force him to learn about himself. I learned so much about this character through a very simple, understated, and stoic performance from Jeffrey Wright, but through the writing and emotional openness of everyone around him. When Lorraine comes up and hugs him or asks him something that he hasn't really thought about before, or when his brother like yells at him or like forces him to realize something, or the way that Coraline like doesn't put up with his shit. Like there is such, I think, a good balance between having a very simple performance and the writing around him, allowing that simple and quiet performance to have so much nuance. Because through the movie American Fiction, I learned so much about Thelonious Ellison. But through Thelonious Ellison, I learned very little about Thelonious Ellison.
Because he's such a interior character.
Correct,
He keeps a lot of it close to the chest, and that's the point that he has to unlearn that essentially to not be like his father in a lot of ways there. And I'm just so glad that Jeffrey Wright and Sterling K. Brown are getting their flowers from the Academy.
We've been seeing great Jeffrey Wright performances 3 times a year for the last 4 years, and we're like, God, he's the greatest, isn't he?
and
it's a starring vehicle for him.
Exactly. It is, like I said, I was listening to some interviews with Cord Jefferson where he said, when I read the book and I started adapting it into a screenplay, I knew I wanted Jeffrey Wright. He's absolutely perfect for this in doing this curmudgeon-y sort of grumbly, rah, 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 and having to sort of emerge from his...
Actually opened the trailer for American Fiction. That was not my intent.
Having to emerge from his shell as a character, and being sort of played off of more outlandish characters in his family and in his professional life.
Well, very interesting. I guess you guys want to pull up your score sheets, I'll give my little closing thought. I think that there is a saving grace to this film in that because the political satire is quite obvious, it's quite on the nose, the dumb Academy voters will maybe learn something and that they will then maybe do better with their movies and their producing choices in the future. Because despite the muddiness of the political message of the film, I think that you can still take away a beneficial message that actually your dumbest viewer is going to get it. And that's important.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what I kind of feel is that, especially what we were talking about with some unrealized potential that we feel in the film, a line from Issa Rae comes to mind from this film where she says, potential is what people see when what's in front of them isn't good enough, or when they feel what's in front of them isn't good enough, importantly. I think that's a very important, it's a lesson for Monk to learn in his personal life as a character. Potentially a little lesson for us to learn as well. I don't know. Maybe American Fiction does have something that he...
Okay, Mr. Mumbler, let's figure out what this film gets. I'm ready. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, I almost forgot.
We have a score. It is 7.5. So that's going to put American Fiction at the bottom spot on our list. Place number 5 out of 5. The point breakdown is I gave it a 6.6. Tanner gave it a 7.3. Abram gave it a 7.8. And then Tucker gave it an 8.4. So there you have it. 4.
Very good.
Very good.
Where are we going next week?
Another review.
Sorry, did you have some final thought on American Fiction you wanted to share?
I feel like I've shared all my thoughts.
Okay.
I've shared all my thoughts.
I thought you were coming out to say something, so I just wanted to give you some time there. But next week, to answer you, Abram, we are switching gears. We're settling in for a long one, ladies and gents. We are watching Martin Scorsese's 3-hour and 12-minute American historical epic, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Whee! Oh, I'm looking forward to this one.
Let's do it.
This will be our second Scorsese review.
Yeah.
Departed.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he won for Departed. That's right. Very good stuff. Very good stuff.
Have you seen this, Timo?
I have not. This...
I
don't...
Go.
Some unbelievable mechanisms prevented me from going and seeing this movie when it came out. AKA
You didn't do it.
AKA my inability to make a schedule.
Yes. Inexplicable mechanism.
Yeah.
So these machinations in the sky behind the curtain.
I don't know how it works. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm really excited to watch this one because people have been telling me about it. I've wanted to see it for months, and I'm really, really ready to talk about it also.
Available on Apple TV Plus for your viewing pleasure.
Yeah. Took
Thank you.
Apple like $200 million to make that possible.
Thank you, Tim Apple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tim Apple.
Well, we will be here next time to talk about Killers of the Flower Moon. Thank you guys for discussing American fiction. If you have thoughts on what we said here or what we said anywhere else, write them down in the comments and join the Discord if you really want to get involved with the Backlot Banter community. Well, until then, stay warm, keep cool. Peace.